Hello, GEMA members, and welcome to our next edition of GEMA Talks. Today, we have with us Kevin Turpin, who is the president of the National Journal in Washington, D.C. For those of you in D.C., you obviously know the National Journal very well, but for those who may not be as familiar with it, National Journal has been around for 50 years, and for many of those years was widely known as the leading print publication that was targeted to the government affairs world and in the highest levels of government, daily and weekly print publication. And not surprisingly, after sort of the pressures on the media industry that have occurred over the last decade or so, they started undergoing a real pivot and real transformation that's really fascinating and interesting. And Kevin has been really the leader of that move, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. And so today, they really are the leader in creating advisory services for, again, government affairs professionals and really the highest levels of government, and that includes editorial and research and insights and custom content and other media products. But Kevin will talk a lot more about that in our conversation. And I also want to bring up the fact that Kevin became CEO, president of this company when he was 32, so incredibly young, and he's been with Atlantic Journal, the National Journal, since the beginning of his career. It's owned by Atlantic Media, which many of you know. So incredibly impressive career trajectory of Kevin, and lots to talk about that and about leadership lessons and the like. So I want to introduce Kevin Turpin. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rich. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be amongst fellow Hoyas.
Absolutely.
Hoya Saxa after the win last night. But
yeah, great win.
Conversation today.
Yeah, no, really excited to have you aboard. I want to start by talking about this transformation that I alluded to, and maybe set the stage for us a little bit. Give us a little bit more about where National Journal was for many years, and then kind of when that pivot started and what kind of led to it and what were the first moves you made, and then explain sort of what it is today and what's the leading role it plays in other ways today in the industry.
Absolutely. So, I always start speaking to our transformation by just setting the stage on what was the environment we were looking at when we decided to make a pivot. So it was a little over a decade ago. We had just gone through the Great Recession, which I think most businesses, and especially the media business, felt the effects of that. And at the same time, we also were experiencing an increased level of competitors into our market. So we were dealing with like this twofold challenge, which is we have new competitors that are starting from scratch, and we're starting digital first, which you mentioned we were a print based, or our foundation as a company was print. Right. And then you had the financial crisis, which was putting a squeeze on the resources that were in our market, and really was shrinking the market some. There were some groups or potential clients or addressable market that just didn't come back after the Great Recession. So we were faced with a question as an organization, which is what path were we going to take? And on one side, it was let's double down on being the best digital first organization that we can be. For us, that was a little harder than other organizations that were starting digital first. So that was going to be a huge culture change, and also was going to be a pretty big level of investment. And when we were looking at that side of things, the question we were asking ourselves was, we're going to put an incredible amount of investment into something that we'd just be competing in the race. It would get us in the race. The second side was, let's really actually take this period that we're in, which was a challenging period for our company, as it was a challenging period for many companies, and think through, well, how else could we serve our market? How else can we serve our current clients? And what would certainly garner us additional clients? And really take a look at that beyond the products and services that we were currently doing, which was primarily journalism. When we were looking at that opportunity, there's something that my boss and mentor, David Bradley, and also a fellow Hoya as well, taught me from the very beginning, which was you always want to be doing something that's different in kind and not degree. So that was a lesson that we were taking with us into this transformation and this pivot. So we chose the other side. That was the harder side because it involved entering an unknown. Okay,
Absolutely.
business.
Yeah.
However, what we were searching for is what are the set of services that we can do that truly would be different in kind for the Washington market, the government affairs market. So that was the foundation of the decision we made. And really where we started, the first step we took was let's spend time with our market. Let's actually take this question to our market, which was what's keeping you up at night right now? But what are the new challenges that you're facing? What are your stakeholders asking you for now that they weren't asking you for 5 years ago? What are you investing in? And really what we began to hear was a yearning for services that we call advisory services, but really more plainly spoken were services that would connect directly into their workflow. So whether that be I'm producing more presentations than I ever did 5 years ago.
Right.
I'm being asked to come speak to the board, come speak to my executives, I have a history on Capitol Hill. We did everything in memos. We did everything in person. We didn't have to create PowerPoint after PowerPoint after PowerPoint. It takes a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Well, that was a key lesson for us on, that could be a workflow tool that could create something that could support that new need they had. I'm looking to be more efficient and run my office in the most efficient and effective way as I possibly can. So those are just a couple examples of things we're hearing. We responded to that knowledge by then starting to launch products. So the thing that we really wanted to get right was the challenges, as you do anytime you're starting new businesses or you're innovating. If you get the challenge right, you may have the solution slightly wrong, but you're just a tweak away from having it right.
Right.
The challenge wrong, you have more of a foundational problem. So what we focused on was the challenge, and then we started testing and learning on products that could go against what we thought were the strongly felt challenges. What that became was us launching an entirely different division in our company. So we didn't abandon journalism. In fact, our journalism is still really the bedrock of what we do as a company. If you ask the average Washington professional, it's probably one of the first things they'll mention when they think about National Journal, that I still get their daily publication that covers Congress and legislation that is moving through the Congress. However, what we did was we added a different division with the journalism that was totally focused on, again, these workflow tools, whether that be a presentation service where we would create PowerPoint decks for government affairs professionals that focused on legislation or politics, but put it in a business ready format for them. That really saved them time on having to condense their thinking on, this is the update that I need to give the CEO. Well, we got them 90% of the way there with the update. So it became really valuable, and also put in a format that made them look similar to the update that the head of strategy would give to the CEO. And then off of those type of workflow tools, once we entered into that space, we began learning more from our customers and our clients about different things that they had that they wouldn't have thought about us for in the past. But because we proved ourselves in the foundational ways, our customers began coming to us with larger problems. Like, I don't really know what my reputation is in Washington, and I'm knocking my head against the wall trying to explain to my corporate stakeholders that, yes, I know our brand is really strong, but in Washington, we're in trouble. And I don't have any metrics to show them why we're in trouble.
Interesting. Yeah.
I need investment. Well, we took that and created a business out of that. Well, we're well positioned to understand what reputation is in Washington. So we launched a program and a business out of that. We had customers come to us and say, Washington is becoming increasingly more about who are the exact right people that you need to be connected to make something work and happen. And it's not only the direct decision makers, but you need to understand who are the influencers around those decision makers so you're connected to the whole network.
Right.
But that takes a lot of research. And I don't really have the time to do the research and keep track of the changing people. Can you all do that? So we launched the business in response to that. I tell all of this foundationally to say, what this created was, after doing this for 10 years, we looked back and said, wow, our business is totally different now. We're now an information services company that responds to the challenges in our market and launches, again, things that can connect directly into the workflow of a government affairs professional or policy professional, while we still provide them with the journalism that our market has expected from us, at least the quality of journalism our market has expected from us for the last 50 years. So it really changed the shape of the company, where certainly there's many different journalism companies that are in our market that are serving the government affairs market and doing it really well. But when a government affairs professional thinks about National Journal now, they say, wow, I still use their journalism, but they have a whole different group that really helps me with my day-to-day execution within my office.
And that this evolution of the new products, this happened, like you said, about 10 years ago. What were some of the key transformational pieces that, for instance, you really had to hire a number of people with new areas of expertise and the like, right? I mean, so
absolutely, it really required us to totally rethink the type of person that we were attracting to the organization. Because if you asked me 10 years ago, our major focus on hiring is we want to get the best journalists that can cover Congress, that can cover elections, and not to say that that's not still a focus, but that was our only focus. And then we were hiring people around that to make that business work. So essentially, we're hiring business development people and marketing people to make that central core product work. Well, today I have a much more diverse set of skills that we're wanting to attract to the organization. So we certainly still want to attract the best journalists, the smartest journalists to be covering Congress and legislation and politics. But also now I need to attract someone who would be typically in a career track of a research analyst that would move up to a consultant, that would move up to like a managing director of a consulting practice, which is obviously a totally different skill set than a journalist. Right. I'm looking for individuals that are highly skilled at account management and customer management, in helping people get through both research and consulting engagements with their needs met and wanting to do more work. So it really required, again, a reimagination on how we were recruiting. And it also had an effect on the mix of staff that we have in our organization. So when we first started this 10 years ago, we started with a very small research staff. So we had, I think, 5 people that we launched, at least on the product side, these new research programs with. Well, today, I have 70 plus people that are dedicated to that, dedicated to those programs. So it really was a big shift in our hiring.
And then when would you say sort of the latest incarnation, what you are today, when would you say that really started to take hold? Would it have been 5 years ago, like this whole thing took kind of 5 years to make this?
It took us about 5 years to really get it going and really make that shift. So about 5 years ago, I think that the shift was complete from purely journalism to more information services. And then once we felt that, okay, we're different now, really to start strategically focusing on that as a different company. And since then, it really has taken hold in our financials. It's taken hold in our strategic plans on moving, acting, making decisions as an information services company rather than just a purely journalism driven company.
Yeah. And through all of this, as I mentioned at the outset, you've been at the National Journal since Georgetown, is that right?
I have, yeah. I graduated in the class of '05, and I started at National Journal 2 weeks after graduation. So,
And are you from the area? Was it, I mean, was politics in your blood or that world or?
no, so I'm not. I'm from Virginia Beach,
Okay.
but I obviously got to DC through Georgetown. Um, you know, I wasn't attracted to National Journal necessarily for the content.
Okay.
I would call myself passively interested in politics, but it wasn't a focus area. I studied psychology in college, so I wasn't a government major, or I wasn't in SFS.
Right.
But why National Journal attracted me was more so my calculation that they were an organization that someone who was thinking about grad school but didn't want to quite go to grad school yet, but wanted to be in a company that would be merit-based, that if I performed at a high level, I could be rewarded while I was figuring out what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And when I interviewed at National Journal, I felt like it was that type of environment. So that's why I joined. It could have been on any topic area as far
Right.
as we're covering. I joined more for the culture that I thought the company was building, and they certainly helped. And I hesitate to use the word they, as in it's we. But at the time,
They.
them, but they certainly held up their end of the bargain there.
And what part of the company did you grow up in? I know you've
Yeah.
had a lot of varied roles, but if you could help us a little understand your journey at the company in terms of different roles you've had and how those have played into your, leadership as president now.
Absolutely. So I started in the sales group, which I am so thankful I started there. It's because any organization, the lifeblood of the organization is how you're going to go out and get the revenue.
Yep.
So that is where I joined. I joined in an entry-level sales role and started to get promoted almost immediately. And really, through a series of promotions, was working my way through the structure there for the first 4 years of my career. At that fourth year, I got the opportunity to move over to the strategy side. That also aligned with me having a clear understanding of what I wanted to do. By that time, I knew I really was passionate about product development, strategic thinking, testing and learning, and then helping direct the path of a specific business or product. That's what I wanted to grow up in. So that move aligned with me having a stronger idea of what I wanted to do with my career. In my first job on the strategy side was in product development, where one of the first things I did was start to do the market research for what eventually became our first put our toe in the water. I would say we probably put 2 feet in the water on this information services path that we were on, where we were launching a research-based membership that would go alongside our journalism products. And then same thing, I started moving through the structure there, and not to bore you or the folks that are listening, I won't go through every role, but where that eventually found me was being over all of product for National Journal. And that was about 5 years after that took place. So say about 9 years into my career, where I was over both new product development as well as all current product. And that was my role before becoming president.
And during that time at all, because you alluded to it, did you think about going to business school? Was that something on your mind? And what was the thinking behind deciding not to go? I'm just curious, because that's some of the people listening in are probably living that right now.
Yeah, it was totally front of mind. I actually planned on going to business school. So after having a couple roles on the strategy side, I deemed it important to go to business school. And this is where strong mentorship comes in.
Yeah.
My mentor was David Bradley, who's the chairman of Atlantic Media, and
a true legend in the
exactly in DC circles. And I think
an incredible mentor to so many.
he was incredible. And David and I started to have a conversation about business school, and he gave me really three reasons why I would go. And the first being, well, I wanted to upskill. So I wanted to burnish my finance and accounting skills and really master those skills. Number two was from a career perspective to up my earning potential. And then number three was for the network, which is very important when you're thinking about business school and what business school you choose, and what expertise area that particular business school has and what network you're building. And what he advised me was for the first two, I was going to get the first two as long as I wanted to continue to work at National Journal, and I was getting that, right? I was involved in modeling businesses and learning finance and accounting enough to be dangerous. I wouldn't trust myself being the accountant of the organization, but I can manage it. Yeah. And then number two, again, I was moving my way through the ranks at National Journal. So number two, as far as upping my earning potential, certainly that could come in if I planned on leaving the organization, but there was opportunity for me at National Journal. And then there was number three, which was the network. Ultimately, I lifted up, and while I was considering it, I got promoted a couple times. It became the best decision for me to keep running opportunities at National Journal and grow my career there and seeking to prove myself there. To see where that could take me. So I decided to do that. It ended up being a pretty good bet for me. It was a blessing. I'm a follower of Christ, so I always say there was the blessing side of it, and then there was the hard work that I was doing to match that blessing. So it ended up working out.
So as I mentioned at the beginning here, you became president of the company at 32 years old, which is obviously a pretty tender age to become the leader of a company. Would love to have you talk a little bit about what that was like at first. And, I've been fortunate that I've had some leadership roles at pretty young ages myself. And I know that there are challenges that come with that. As great as it obviously is, there's obviously some challenges that come with that in terms of, often being the youngest person in the room or not having some of the, obviously experience that others have in leading. So how did you what was the experience like, and how did you work through it in those early days?
Yeah, I think, so I'll answer that question in two ways. There's the internal experience and external experience. Okay. So internally, I had been in the culture for so long and had proof points behind why I would be considered and ultimately hired for the role as president, where many people respected the work that I had done, appreciated the work that I had done, and were comfortable with me being the leader of the organization.
Yeah. In some ways, it probably wasn't like a real surprise that you got the role, right? It wasn't
exactly right. So because I'd been there so long, and they saw things, and then there was proof points, right? You were central to launching these businesses. My career was growing aligned with the new opportunities we were chasing as a business. So we were almost kind of together. So when I was named president, people generally understood and accepted that. And thankfully I had great colleagues and really got behind the vision I was seeking to set for the organization to continue to take it in this path of an information services company. Externally, it was interesting, right? So externally, Washington, our client set, typically middle age, typically white, typically male. Going into meetings, there were often times where I had to prove why I was there, or was even asked questions that could be perceived of me verifying why I was in a certain room. And I think you know, that I understood somewhat.
Yeah.
You know, it's my age definitely wouldn't have placed me normally in the rooms that I would be in. So I often will get questions on, oh, who do you work for? And I would tell them National Journal. And the first every follow up was, well, what do you cover there? And
All right. So they thought you were a journalist.
yeah, and then the awkward exchange of, well, actually, I'm the president, and it always was so awkward. I got a little, I will admit, I got a little bit of a chuckle out of it every time, but it always led to an awkward interaction.
That's very good. And so, there's the fact that you became president at 32 years old. I'd like to talk a little bit about, what you think led to that success in terms of your, what do you attribute that to? What sort of personal qualities, professional qualities, what do you think for you has been the keys to those?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I do a lot of mentoring now because mentoring is so important to me in my journey. And when I get asked, well, how do I work my way through a career? How can I be successful and work my way vertically through a career? And the first thing I always say is you have to erase all hesitancy of asking questions and being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know how to do something. Can you teach me? I think a lot of that's a lot of my success. I was humble enough to say, I don't know how to do financial modeling. And I can remember I had a colleague, her name was TT, and she was our FP&A. And I just went and asked her, hey, can I just sit with you and ask you questions? And can you show me how you approach modeling? And she taught me. And I was in my career. So I had to be vulnerable to do that, right? I had to be vulnerable enough to say, look, I don't know how to do something. Can you teach me? Can you show me? But that approach on not trying to, I think there's a lot of fake it until you make it, which you can see the value in that. But my approach was, well, if I don't fake it, I can actually understand how to do something a lot faster and become competent in it. So I do attribute some of my growth on just not being afraid to be vulnerable and humble and ask people questions. And what I found is people are generous. The natural setting of people that one works with is generosity. I think people like the feeling of generosity. They like the feeling of helping people, and often they just don't get asked. So we all kind of go about our day. Number two, I think, which was really important to my career path, is I had great mentoring. And that's not, I mentioned David Bradley, and he's had a tremendous impact on my career. And the great thing about the story with David is he was purely my mentor. This wasn't a situation where he was mentoring and then shepherding me through the organization. We had a totally separate mentoring partnership or relationship that was separate from the work I was doing, but I was applying what he was teaching me in my work, and I would promote it separately, where he wouldn't have. Often he didn't even know I got promoted. I would tell him after, and he would say, "Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't know you were in that role now." The only promotion that he was part of was me becoming president. So this tells you that he was committed to growing me and growing my skill set. And that was really helpful, but he wasn't the only mentor. I had a number of great mentors throughout my journey in sales, in strategy, in product development, that I took a little bit from each one and built my own style out of that. So I would credit at least my quick path was actually leveraging the mentorship that was available to me and actually applying what they're teaching me, which is the other side of it. I think a lot of people have mentors and then they don't apply anything that the mentor tells them. And then, they just keep going back and asking the same questions. I tried not to ask the same questions. I tried to apply what someone told me. And then I think third, I mentioned this earlier, I was blessed. I mean, I think I was blessed to work with great people who invested in me, and I certainly gave them a return on that investment. But it's always a blessing just to work with people, the people you work with, and their commitment to you while you commit to the organization. Was something that I found at National Journal that certainly helped me move through my career.
I think, and I know you're showing a lot of humility too, but the other things I sense in the little time we've known each other is, and I think probably important to this is, and this more specific to the job, which is, I think, real instincts on the product side.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It's a great point, and that you push me to. One of the things that I would say I'm really good at is listening in market and then applying quickly. So the same skills I was using to listen to mentors, listen to colleagues and apply, I applied those same skills in the market. So I'm very good at hearing what a market is telling a business, both verbally and non-verbally.
Yeah, really important for people to hear this, because not everyone is a great listener.
So what I found was there's the questions that you ask. Lead with questions. Lead with how a customer is experiencing your product. Lead with questions about what their day-to-day is like. I think the mistake that many business leaders make, and businesses in general, they go into a market and they have an idea, and they go and tell the client why their idea is the solution to the problem that they haven't identified. So you
fit your company into my product.
Exactly. Whereas, where I've always gone into the market is, let's find the problem. I mentioned this earlier on, was our approach with National Journal. Let's get the problem right first. I'm good at trying to find that problem. What's the core of the problem? And let's put our attention to solving the right problem. And I think that leads to success in a business. If you have the attention on solving the right problem and finding the right problem, it makes product development so much easier. It almost does the product development for you. So that was a skill that helped me. And I think it was one of the main reasons I became president, is there was a trust that as we were continuing this transformation, I would shepherd us in a direction that was truly grounded in market need. And I had proven that was my approach.
Yeah, that's great. And then obviously the second piece is having those instincts to know what the market need is, but then being able to execute at your company to make sure you have you actually fulfilled on that market need. And another area, it sounds like you've had some great success in.
Yeah, I think there's the executing the right product, which sometimes you also have to be willing to say, if I'm trying to find the right product, but if I don't find the right product, I'm willing to be decisive, shift us to the right place.
Admit that I got it wrong. And
quickly. Fell fast. It's okay to fail, but fail fast is one of the things that I've learned throughout the years. But number two is hiring the right people, right? I mean, some of our greatest business successes were because we identified the right problem, we got a product up and running, and we hired the right person to shepherd the product, right? And that person came in and they took it to the next level. And that's something that I've tried to be on top of, just as leader of the business, not to be so attached to it needs to be me, but be more attached to who's the best positioned person to bring this business to the greatest level of success, and to master that.
You mentioned that, as a Black leader in this industry, you did mention that it's largely a white industry. Just curious, what that experience has been like.
Sure.
That's my sort of first question on that. I'd love to hear you.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I think we've heard this often, especially since May, that representation matters. And throughout my career, I didn't have a lot of representation or examples of people who look like me, let alone my age. But then you add being a Black male,
right?
So that really can affect the the breadth of the vision that one can have. If you don't see people who look like you, it's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. You start to think,
Right.
maybe people like me aren't qualified for the role. And
Sure.
that's true.
Absolutely.
But
I can see how
that's why
that mindset
representation,
sets in.
that's where the mindset can quickly go there. So with moving into the president role, I think being a Black male has been both a huge blessing, but also feeling the weight of it. So the huge blessing is, wow, how blessed I am to be in this role, and to have the opportunity to shepherd National Journal, and I never take that for granted. The huge weight of responsibility I feel is, I better not mess this up.
Right. So that sort of role model, the role model.
I not only am I a role model, I also don't want to turn into the testing of the waters that leads to another direction. Because when you get representation, you then feel like, okay, I am now the representation, and if I fail, will there be any more representation? So when I mention the weight of it, you feel that weight. It motivates me, but also it's tiring, right?
I can imagine. Yeah, that's real.
It's I live in a state of I need to prove myself no matter what we do as a company or where we go. I still need to prove myself because I want more of me to be able to be in these roles in the industry.
Yeah. And, as you know, there's been very important and robust conversations that have been happening about how do companies enhance their representation, with people of color and the like. And I'm just curious if there's anything you're doing at your company or specific beliefs you have about how you go about and do that.
Yeah. But one, I think it starts with a change in mindset within the organization that it takes intentionality. So when I say change in mindset, there's a view, and I understand where it comes from, that if we're merit-based, we're always seeking to find the best talent that we possibly can, which I think every organization says that we don't necessarily have to make diversity a priority. We're just looking for the best talent. And I think the quote that often gets said is, we're colorblind. I think a lot of people say they're colorblind. There's been a lot of insights that we've seen now that it talks to the fallacy of being colorblind. So when I say it takes a change in mindset, it actually takes putting that away. Not to say we're not looking for top quality and good fits for the roles, et cetera, but to actually say, that got us one result that doesn't look like diversity, doesn't look like really bringing representation into our organization. So we have to proactively change the mindset. And that change is being intentional, actually starting from the hiring point. Yes, I'm looking for the best talent, but I am going to be intentional in looking for groups that represent diversity. And it's not only, obviously, there's ethnicity, but there's gender, there's sexuality, there's class that one comes from. Diversity really is all encompassing, but it has to take the intentionality of that, putting that into your mindset when recruiting, I think, is where it starts. Number two, I think, is that same intentionality of recruiting needs to stay when then developing talent. Because again, what we will tell ourselves is, once someone comes in, everything's fair. It's all based on performance, but research says that that's not necessarily how that is actually being executed.
So beginning to hire with better representation is only sort of step one. You can't check that box and go walk away. And
you can't go on. You actually have to be intentional.
That's
where I think my story my story actually is an example of intentionality. We didn't do this, and David Bradley would tell anyone, I didn't do this to be intentional because Kevin was a Black male. I did it because I thought Kevin was a talented young person that I was willing to invest in. However, what his investment ended up becoming is he paid special attention to me, in the sense that he was teaching me things that he knew and he had been through that I then applied. Well, that then prepared me to be able to run a P&L. Well, if I didn't have David take that interest in me as a young person who he thought was smart and thought had some potential, well, I wouldn't have been prepared to be president of the company. And a lot of people that look like me don't naturally get the connection with what typically is their bosses who are white, both male and female, because there isn't that natural, we've come from the same place. There's not really the, we have things in common that might happen naturally for our white counterparts, where there's more in common, where that type of relationship can be struck up, the interest is taken in, right. In the informal training happens. So when I mean being intentional about developing talent, then it actually takes some intentionality to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out to my people of color staff to make sure that they are getting the relationships and that informal training and preparation that then will prepare them as well. And then there's also obviously there's a formal too. It's getting them to the opportunities to do things that are getting close to running a P&L.
Yeah. Love to talk a little bit about leadership. You know, as the leader of that organization, you're really espousing and formulating your culture and the culture you want to have inside your organization. So I guess two questions. One, what kind of culture do you believe you've built there? And then secondly, maybe share some of your most important, beliefs about leadership and important tenets of leadership that you sort of live by.
That's great. So,
but first maybe on the first question,
the culture. So, the culture we're seeking to build at National Journal has some foundational elements that really are thread through David Bradley run organization. So one is spirit of generosity. And that is a cultural value that we try to embody. That's generosity to our clients, that we always seek to be there for our clients and to respond to the changing needs that they have. But that also is to our colleagues, that there's always a generous spirit that we're coming from to support our colleagues' success. And if everyone is certainly ambitious, and certainly we try to hire people that are intellectually curious and all of the things that I think many employers are looking for. But if you add that generosity piece, you create a culture where everyone's rooting for each other while moving towards their individual ambition. So everyone's supporting their individual and the ambitions of their colleagues. The second piece of it is force of intellect, which being intellectually curious in having proven success, whether it be academic success or success with former employers, and putting those type of people together and adding the generosity piece really creates this interesting culture where you're constantly learning from colleagues and also being supported by colleagues at the same time. The layer I would add on to this is and it's a diversity, equity, and inclusion layer. What we're trying to build is a culture in which people from diverse backgrounds feel like they can bring themselves to the culture and not have to mute anything about themselves. So we all share these two spirit of generosity, force of intellect, core values, but also feeding out of spirit of generosity, we actually welcome diverse perspectives and diverse approaches to the organization, because we think that it will make us better, it will make our business better, it will make our culture better. And that's something we're trying to really ingrain into the culture. And like all organizations, we have work to do there. And we're taking on that work but that is something that is important to us, and we have named as important to us. Now, to your second question on specific tenets of leadership that I seek to espouse and live by, the first one is listening. I think the best leaders are leaders that actually listen to their staff. And again, I'll go back to both what's said and not said.
Right.
so,
That's right.
Always be looking for the things that are said and that are not said. And how do you respond as a leader to that? How do you shepherd your organization through those moments of challenge? Because that's what I think my main job is. How do I shepherd National Journal, not through the good times? My staff is great. I have great leaders that work with me.
Right.
Couldn't do anything that I do without them. But what they rely on me on is those hard moments of friction and challenge. How do I get our organization through them and over to the other side in a better place? The only way I can do that is if I'm a good listener. I'll totally miss the boat if I'm not doing that. I think the second thing that I am always seeking to execute is put myself in a position to always support others' success and not put myself above others' success. I think the best leaders are the ones that really see that if my company's successful, if my teams are successful, if my teams feel engaged, I will be successful. Yeah. So I dedicate to myself to service rather than a personal accomplishment. My personal accomplishment is company accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And I try to approach leadership in that way. And then number three, focus on hiring the right people, not bending people to your will. So what I mean by that is, my view is one could be much more successful if they're focused on bringing the right people into their culture and bringing the right person into their culture and letting that person do what their 90th percentile skill is, giving them room to lead, giving them room to make decisions, rather than hiring people that you can bend to your will. It's my philosophy. I actually think I've seen people who are bend to will leaders that are really successful too. So that is not me saying there's one's better than the other, but the one that at least I try to live by.
I think I have to say that, that's been a really important one in my career as well. And I always say to people, it's that balance, right? Because, you're in a corporate setting, so there obviously are guidelines, but I always say you want people to feel like, not only can they do their job, but you want people to feel like they can dream a little, Yeah. And I think one of the worst things that happens in business is when people feel continually stifled and continually being told either bend to the will or being told, no, you can't do that, or no, you shouldn't try that. And I think I'm sure it sounds like that's something that's, worked well for you and that you certainly believe in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to end on one final sort of question around, advice for those listening in, particularly our younger alumni or students that may be listening in. Just general advice, career advice for someone who's looking to break into, the business world or the world.
So I think the advice I would have is don't focus necessarily on your nouns, and I'm taking this from a former colleague. Focus on your verbs. When you're starting your career, I think a lot of people make the mistake of pinning themselves to a specific role. I want to be fill in the blank. And they don't focus enough on gathering skills that build them into what they want to be. So as you're thinking about if you want to break into media or if you want to break into any industry, know what verbs you're looking to be better at. Know what verbs that the noun that you want to be requires. So the job, your dream job, well, what do you have to be good at to get that dream job?
Yeah.
And if you are in opportunities that are helping you sharpen the skills that you need to be good at, then you're in the right place. Give yourself room to sharpen and grow those skills, and the job, the dream job, the noun will take care of itself.
I like that. That's a good one. Say that again. What focus on the nouns?
Focus on your verbs and not your nouns.
Focus on your verbs and not your nouns. That's a good one. I like that one. Well, I'll use that one too in the future.
Yeah.
Credit. Kevin, this has been wonderful, really wide ranging and really a lot of great insights and obviously inspiring conversation for many, given your great career that you've had and have a lot more to come. So it'll be exciting to see where your career journey goes from here. It's been really interesting. And then obviously really interesting to hear about the transformation of National Journal and how you've taken this company to a whole new place in a really obviously interesting industry environment. So congratulations on that.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this has been my pleasure, and I've really loved having a conversation with you. I felt like we were having a conversation and just had people eavesdropping in, which is always.
Well, that's really nice to hear. That's my intention. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for that. That's great. And enjoy the rest of the week and go Hoyas.
Yeah. Hoya Saxa.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Okay, take care, Kevin.